1. If it's a one-way conversation, me asking them questions and taking interest in their life and them asking none or minimal questions about me. 2. When she tries to spritz me with holy water since I was never baptized. 3. When they're nice to you but not to the waiter. Because one day you'll be in the waiter's position. Nangavade, from personal experience, casually dropping that the earth is only a few thousand years old and rock stars get famous by making a deal with Satan. The worst part is the moment when you have to stop laughing because you realize it wasn't a silly joke. 5. If they expect sex. Fun story. I went on the worst date a while ago. Guy seemed nice enough when we first met, but during the first date, I realized he was a total sleaze and maybe crazy. He asked me out of the blue if I was on birth control. When I said yes, he said, "Sweet, that means I don't have to wear a condom." I was so taken aback. Who says stuff like that? At that point, I knew I'd never touch him, not when a 10.5-foot pole, but I felt weirdly compelled to explain to him how stupid that was. I asked what he'd do if he knocked me up. "Oh, it's no big deal. You'll just get it taken care of, that's all." He didn't understand that abortions aren't cheap, easy to get, or fun. When I expressed that, he rolled his eyes and said condoms weren't fair to him, and that having to wear a condom is a deal breaker. I left that restaurant so fast I must have made his head spin. He tried to backtrack, said, "Maybe I can make an exception for you." I declined and told him I wasn't interested. Then he tried to call me up 9 months later to hang out. Because no girl in all of DC wants to go on a date, and it's so frustrating. Maybe because you're gross and awful, dude? Also, this guy was 30. I'd expect this beast hool from a teenager, not a 30-year-old. 6. Constantly one-upping. Yeram. Talking non-stop about wanting a traditional family where mom doesn't work. Like, sure, but that's not me, so move on. Or bringing up being an alpha male. Just no. 8. Being constantly on their phone. 9. Lying. If someone is significantly different from anything they have led me to believe prior to the first date, I'm immediately not interested. I don't really care that much about their weight, height, political leanings, religion, etc. But lie to me first thing, and we've got nothing else to talk about. 10. No sense of humor, or one that doesn't mesh well with mine. 11. When they start clowning on your interests. 12. I wore heels on a blind date. The guy looked me up and down, then said, "You know it's rude to wear heels on a blind date, right?" I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't premeditate the fragility of your ego." He backpedaled and begged me to stay for the meal. I had half a drink and had to walk out. When someone shows you their true colors, why waste anyone's time after that? Badimundravdi had someone on a dating app using 20-year-old pics, lying about her age to an extreme extent. She said she was 25. I was 19, and she asked if I minded dating older women. I didn't mind at all, but she showed up, and the first thing I thought of was, wow, she takes really good pics. But I decided since I was already there, might as well make the best of it. I found out she was 49 and had a son older than me because he ended up working at the bowling alley we went to. I thought she seemed a little uncomfortable when we arrived to the bowling alley, but shrugged it off to her being nervous about an internet date. Until I went to go get some food, and her son who worked at that bowling alley pulled me to the side to ask what I was doing with his mom. He told me she was 49 and married, and then the best part, he was 6 months older than me, 14. Being inconsiderate, went on a date recently where the guy speed walked to the cafe exit and let the door close behind him as I was just getting to the door myself. I purposely slowed down to see his reaction, and there wasn't even a backwards glance or motion to reopen the door or check I was okay, to account for why I wasn't immediately behind him. I hold the door for people all the time, so I don't see this as a gender thing. Also, not apologizing when you made a mistake in an effort to seem infallible or self-assured or whatever. TLDR, lack of consideration and lack of humility. Padinente, I went on a date with a woman I'd been talking with for a couple of weeks. We lived in different towns, decided to meet up in a pub in her town. I lasted less than a pint. All she did was run men down, say how useless we are, all after one thing, etc. She seemed genuinely surprised when I stood up and said goodbye and walked out. Padinare, if in the midst of conversation you have to brag about how much your parents make or how they gave your brother an Audi, I'm done. I'm not saying coming from a rich family is bad, but if you feel a need to bring it up on the first date, I'm going to assume you have nothing better to bring to the table. 17. She brings her 3 kids that she failed to tell me about. 18. Being late. I'm not talking a few minutes late. I'm talking a half hour late, or anything later than that. 19. When he brings up his idealistic woman physically, and I match none of those. For example, all girls should have straight hair. 20. Being married. Bringing your friend to the date because you were nervous. Bragging about your knife collection at home. Never knew these things would come up in the first dates I've been on. But here we are. Yirubatti ondravudu. Being racist and sexist without realizing it, and then kinda shaming you for what you are. I didn't call her back. 22. Dating in my teens and early 20s, I was naive and insecure. So loved it when a guy said I was so much better than his last girlfriend, who was a boy. Dating again in my 50s, being wiser and secure with myself, my response to the ex-boomer story is, what the hell did you do to her? Yirubatti mundravudu. Well, one guy showed up to the wrong lunch location and made me drive to meet him. I was working, he was not. Strike 1. I arrive and he gets out of his car wearing sweats. He made me wait over 2 hours while he got ready. Strike 9. Is 7 inches shorter than he said he was, which isn't a problem unless you lie about it. Strike 13. And then, he was missing some critical burger-eating teeth. That's not even a strike. At this point, I was in for the entertainment value this would add. Then he got into a loud, long anti-government rant that only paused when I realized my car was being broken into. I run outside and defend my car, expecting my date to be gallantly by my side. He was not. He just sat in the booth content to let me fight off someone rummaging through my car. Strikes 1,039,276,651. Oh. And he cried twice. And watching him eat a burger wasn't even close to being as entertaining as I wanted it to be. 24. I had a guy choke me during a bit of making out on the first date. I said I wasn't into that in public, definitely not with someone I just met, and not while a bit buzzed. He proceeded to try how actually choke me during 2 follow-up kisses. I was a bit drunk. If I was sober, I would have ended it sooner. And then sulked and said it was just a joke when I said I was paying my half of the bill and going home alone. So, major deal breaker, don't choke someone you don't know. 25. When he tells you he's married but wants something on the side? Irubatiari. Back before I met my boyfriend, I went on a Tinder date with a guy who was new to where I lived at the time. During conversation, I mentioned offhand that there were certain places you didn't want to walk after dark because a lot of people got mugged in those areas. This guy started mansplaining to me how it would be fine to walk there after dark. You just need to be confident. He's a world traveler, nobody has ever bothered him, etc. I was like, no dude, trust me, it isn't safe. But he just kept talking over me. He seemed to view it as a challenge. He was arrogant in general, but this was what made me make an excuse and leave the date early. Like, okay, dude, if you're so tough, then feel free to go get mugged. Yirubatiyeru. Went on a date with a guy yesterday who was a Christian. I'm an atheist, but that's fine. And went on an unprompted monologue about how homosexuality is not God's will, not fine. I am a man. We were both men. It was a gay date. It was very confusing. 28th. Bad hygiene. Ended up nicknaming him Halitosis Boy. Had a guy turn up to a date once like he hadn't showered in months. He smelled so bad, I had to lean back in my chair to get away from the smell. So gross. He was the worst, but lots of guys make no effort to look or dress nice on a date too. Always makes me think. This is as good as it gets, so that's a nope. 29. If they don't like animals. I've always had dogs, have 2 right now, and went on a date once where he said he hated animals. I left shortly after.